Chapter 1. Are you sure you want to erase all your personal information? Once successful, you will completely vanish from this world. Untraceable, gazing at the woman before him, barely in her early 20s yet holding application materials to destroy her identity, the staff member looked exceptionally surprised. Willow Astor nodded, her voice soft yet firm, "I'm sure." Hearing her answer, the staff member took her documents and stamped them. "The erasure process will take about 15 days. Please wait patiently." She didn't linger, turning and leaving the service hall. Not long after walking out, she made a few taps on her phone and soon received a flight confirmation message from an airline. After handling these matters, she hailed a cab back to the villa. The car drove towards the exclusive villa district. Soon, the taxi could go no further. It wasn't far from Julian Thorne's villa, so she got out and slowly walked ahead. She hadn't walked long when her attention was drawn to a Maybach parked by the roadside. The car was shaking violently, its meaning unclear, sparking the imagination. The window was half lowered, revealing the figures of a man and a woman inside. The handsome man leaned against the seat, lighting a cigarette. His suit jacket was casually open, one hand pressing against the woman's waist, the other slightly lowering the window to extinguish the glowing tip of his cigarette. On his well-defined hand, he wore a wedding ring engraved with 3 letters, W.A. Willow, Astor. Her body trembled slightly. She took out her phone, found the number she had kept pinned for 7 years, and dialed. He answered quickly. Julian Thorne's gentle voice, tinged with a strange hoarseness, came through the phone. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "Are you at the company?" she asked, not answering his question, her eyes quietly welling up with moisture, feigning nonchalance. "Yes, I am." His low chuckle came from the other end. When he spoke again, his voice was even gentler with a soothing tone. "Are you missing your husband? I'm sorry, the company's a bit busy today. My dearest has been neglected. Wait for me at home a little longer. Your husband will be back soon." She said nothing more and pressed the hang-up button. At the same time, the Maybach she had been staring at began to shake again as the call ended, the movements becoming even more intense. She fought back the stinging pain in her heart and turned away, unwilling to watch any longer. An hour later, the main door of the Thorne villa suddenly opened. Julian Thorne hurried in, one arm holding a bouquet of blooming roses, the other a box of pastries. In the living room, Willow Astor didn't greet him as usual. She just sat on the sofa, seemingly oblivious to his return. His face was full of apology. He coaxed and kissed her. "Sweetheart, a sudden meeting came up and I couldn't get away. I'm a bit late. I'll accept any punishment, okay?" She lowered her gaze, her eyes falling on the dense cluster of kiss marks beneath his open shirt. She asked softly, "Julian Thorne, do you still love me?" He hadn't noticed the exposed kiss marks on his chest. Hearing her question, he panicked and hugged her tightly. "Why are you suddenly asking this? Of course, I love you. The whole world knows I love you more than life itself. How could I not love you?" Julian Thorne's answer made Willow Astor curve her lips into a self-mocking smile. Yes, the whole world knew. Julian Thorne was madly in love with his wife, Willow Astor, willing to give his life for her. Her family background was difficult. For as long as she could remember, her parents argued endlessly every day. Sometimes, the fights escalated to physical violence, smashing pots, throwing bowls, even grabbing kitchen knives as if wanting to kill each other. Yet, after every fight, they would cry to her, saying if it weren't for her, they would have divorced long ago. Growing up in such an environment, she finally saw them divorce when she was a freshman in high school. Consequently, she was extremely resistant to romance. Even though countless people had pursued her since childhood, she had never considered a relationship. Julian Thorne appeared at this time. It was love at first sight for him, and he began a relentless pursuit. He confessed his love 78 times, and she rejected him 78 times. Until one time, they were in a car accident. He unhesitatingly shielded her with his body. She was unharmed thanks to his protection, but he broke 3 ribs and was bedridden for 3 full months. Her heart was made of iron, but he had pried it open with half his life. After they started dating, the Thorne family, a wealthy and influential dynasty, disapproved of Julian dating a girlfriend with an ordinary background. So he renounced his family, gave up all inheritance rights, and struck out on his own. He worked himself to the bone, pushing himself to the brink of exhaustion and illness to establish a conglomerate, J.W. Group, rivaling Thorn Industries, finally forcing his family to relent and allow her into the family. After their marriage, he doted on her even more extravagantly. For her birthday, he spent millions of dollars on a fireworks display and hired a professional team for a drone show to delight her. On their wedding anniversary, he booked all the major public screens in the city to declare his love to the world. She was kidnapped by his enemies. They subjected him to extreme humiliation, forcing him to kneel. To protect her, his shocking act of kneeling became a viral sensation. Those few days, their names dominated the trending topics. Julian Thorne's astonishing kneel for Willow Astor. A Julian Thorne comes once in a millennium. Pure love icon falls yet. This same Julian Thorne, who loved her so desperately in the 4th year of their marriage, secretly kept his new female secretary, Sylvia Meadows, as a mistress. He held her during the day, telling her he loved her, but spent his nights in his secretary's bed, cherishing his secretary. The Maybach just now belonged to Julian Thorne. Just how impatient was he to be so brazenly involved with Sylvia Meadows right at their doorstep? She had known the truth for 3 whole months. In these 3 months, she had doubted, suffered, despaired, but she had never confronted him. The only thing she did was to erase all her personal information. Julian Thorne, do you remember what I said on our wedding day? Willow Astor looked into his eyes. As he froze, she smiled faintly. I told you, you pried open my heart with the most ardent love. If one day you stop loving me, tell me plainly. I won't cling to you, but if you deceive me, I will disappear forever and you will never find me again. Now, her words had become a prophecy. In half a month, she would disappear completely, and he would search heaven and earth for her, but find no trace. Chapter 2, her out-of-the-blue words made Julian Thorne even more flustered. Sweetheart, why are you suddenly bringing this up? He didn't understand why Willow Astor was suddenly saying this. After a moment of thought, he seemed to have a sudden realization. Has someone been gossiping to you? Without waiting for her reply, he immediately stood up, his face grim, and made a call. Bring every woman I've interacted with recently over here. Not long after the call ended, all the maids from the villa and female employees from the company were gathered. Looking at the maids and employees standing in a row, he spoke with a somber face. You all, tell Madam everything about your recent interactions with me, down to the last detail. The women exchanged glances. A maid in the middle, dressed in a uniform, quickly stepped forward. I've only seen Mr. Thorne once recently. It was when Madam was on her period. Mr. Thorne asked me to teach him how to make a soothing herbal tea and inquired in great detail about a woman's needs during her cycle, all to alleviate Madam's discomfort. Seeing someone speak up, others also came forward. I just started not long ago. The first time I saw Mr. Thorne, he had noticed Madam was a bit down lately and wanted to cheer her up. He asked us for suggestions on what gift would make Madam happy. Mr. Thorne approached me because he learned Madam hadn't been eating well these past few days. He repeatedly instructed me to come up with various appetizing pastries for Madam. The women chattered on, but everything they said indicated that Julian Thorne's interactions with them were all for Willow Astor's sake. Just then, a knock came from not far away. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound and saw it was the president's secretary, Sylvia Meadows, dressed in a tight uniform skirt. Sorry, I had some personal matters and came late. Thinking about the discussions she had just heard and looking at the assembled maids and employees, she smiled and walked over to Willow Astor, offering an explanation. Madam, please rest assured, Mr. Thorne's interactions with me are almost entirely work-related. Everyone knows Mr. Thorne only loves Madam. He hardly says more than a few words outside of business matters, so how could he have any other kind of involvement with us? Hearing this, Willow Astor finally lifted her gaze. Sylvia Meadows' smile was appropriate, her attitude respectful. If she hadn't witnessed it with her own eyes, she would never have imagined that she and Julian Thorne had an illicit relationship. Nor would she have understood the hidden provocation in her smiling eyes. Seeing Willow Astor staring at Sylvia Meadows, Julian Thorne's temple throbbed, and he spoke in a low, firm voice. Those of you who work for me need to understand one thing. My wife is my vulnerability. I can accept mistakes at work, but if anyone dares to come before Willow and speak ill of her or spread rumors, there will be only one outcome. The crowd murmured that they wouldn't dare. Then they gradually dispersed. When Sylvia Meadows, the last to arrive, had completely disappeared from sight, he pulled Willow back into his arms. "Now do you believe me?" Whether it was her imagination or not, when he spoke again, she felt his voice tremble. "Sweetheart, please never say those words about leaving or disappearing again. I would die." Chapter 3. Willow Astor said nothing, merely feeling the warmth of his embrace, the irony and pain intertwining endlessly in her heart. He's such a good actor. If she hadn't personally witnessed him with another woman, perhaps under Julian Thorne's elaborate explanation, she really would have believed him. But alas, there were no ifs in this world. Julian Thorne, once unfaithful, always unfaithful. Perhaps Willow Astor's unusual behavior gave him a sense of crisis. For the next few days, Julian Thorne deliberately cleared his schedule of all business matters and stayed home with her. To make her happy, a stream of luxury goods and designer clothes from fashion shows were delivered to the villa. But no matter how many things he sent, she never once smiled. Until this day, he mysteriously blindfolded her and led her to the tallest skyscraper downtown. When the hands covering her eyes were removed, she saw a candlelight dinner he had meticulously prepared. If it were before, seeing the surprise he prepared, she would have been delighted, moved. But now she merely sat down silently in the chair he pulled out for her, eating quietly, listening to him reminisce about their past. "Willow, do you remember? This is where I proposed to you. I planned this wedding for 6 whole months, broadcast live worldwide. Do you remember what I did the moment you said yes to my proposal?" Willow Astor's hand, cutting her steak, paused slightly. She said softly, "You cried." A slight smile touched Julian Thorne's lips. "Yes, I cried." How much love must it take for a man to shed tears in front of global cameras when marrying the girl he loved? Hearing him bring up the past, it would be a lie to say her heart wasn't touched at all. Perhaps in the past, he truly had loved her. But now, things were different, and the man before her was no longer the Julian Thorne who had sworn to love only her forever. She was lost in her thoughts when a sapphire pendant necklace suddenly appeared before her eyes. The style was identical to a piece of jewelry that had recently appeared at a Sotheby's auction and was sold for a multi-million-dollar price. She looked up, her gaze meeting his eyes, which were filled with affection. "This necklace is called the Devotion. The moment I saw it, I felt it was perfect for you. I also love its name, the Devotion, devoted to Willow. It signifies I will love you for a lifetime." She stared into his eyes, momentarily stunned. Just then, Sylvia Meadows walked over. She smiled and greeted Willow Astor first, then respectfully approached Julian Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, everything you asked for is ready." He nodded and snapped his fingers. Bang, 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 the moment Julian Thorne snapped his fingers, countless fireworks shot up and exploded, blooming into brilliant flowers in the night sky. Sylvia Meadows looked at Willow Astor and said with envy, "Madam, these fireworks will go on for a whole day and night. Mr. Thorne knows you love fireworks, so he specially prepared this surprise for you." The fireworks were romantic. She liked them. But fireworks are fleeting, and so is love. A gust of wind blew the napkin in front of Willow Astor to the ground. She instinctively bent down to pick it up, but her peripheral vision caught a glimpse beneath the ruffled tablecloth. A pair of legs in stockings was gently brushing against Julian Thorne's suit pants. There were only 3 people present. It wasn't her, so it was obvious who was brushing against his leg. What made her breath catch was that Julian Thorne didn't push the leg away. Instead, when Sylvia Meadows playfully started to withdraw, he suddenly reached out and, with a domineering grip, seized her ankle. His well-defined hand looked exceptionally sensual against her black stockings, caressing her ankle, the gentle touch sending shivers through her. Finally, his hands, no longer satisfied, roamed upwards from her ankle. Just as he was about to reach under her skirt, an unstoppable momentum building, Julian Thorne stood up. His expression showed no sign of abnormality, still wearing that look of deep affection, merely tinged with a little guilt. "Sweetheart, I'm sorry, I have to make an urgent call. Please wait here for a bit. I'll be back to join you after my call." With that, he got up and left. Not long after he left, Sylvia Meadows also followed. Watching their departing figures, Willow Astor didn't listen to him and wait. Instead, she too followed. Finally, she stopped at the rooftop stairwell. Not far away, Julian Thorne was holding Sylvia Meadows in his arms, kissing her passionately. Chapter 4. After what seemed like an eternity of kissing, he finally released Sylvia Meadows, pinning her fiercely against the corner of the wall, his voice hoarse. "Why are you seducing me? I told you, in front of Willow, you are not to be so bold." Sylvia Meadows didn't answer his question. She wrapped her arms around his neck and giggled, then, after a long moment, leaned close to his ear, her breath like orchids. "Well, were you seduced or not? I was jealous, can't I be a little petulant?" As she coquettishly whined, she rubbed her body against his hard chest. He felt her watery softness and said nothing, but his breathing grew heavier. A moment later, he couldn't control himself and kissed her deeply again. "Tomorrow, I'll set off the same fireworks for you. From now on, whatever Willow has, you'll have too. Just one thing, my bottom line, don't cause trouble in front of Willow." Although she had long known about Julian Thorne and Sylvia Meadows, the impact of seeing it with her own eyes was devastating. Her heart throbbed with a dull pain, like a blunt knife sawing through her flesh, and tears welled up in her eyes uncontrollably. Tears blurred Willow Astore's vision. Through the narrow crack in the door, she watched the two in the stairwell, oblivious to the world, saw him kissing Sylvia Meadows' neck while one hand had already slipped under her skirt. The woman's soft moans and the man's restrained gasps intertwined, drifting through the crack in the door. Her mind told her she should turn and leave, but her legs seemed rooted to the spot, unable to move. Separated by only a wall, she listened to the man who had once sworn he would never betray her, now entwined with another woman. She tremblingly took out her phone, aimed it at the scene not far away, and pressed the record button. However long they were entangled inside, she listened outside for just as long. Finally, as the two let out climactic gasps, she glanced at the recording time on her screen. A full hour and 36 minutes, but it wasn't over. Seeing Julian Thorne unwrap a second condom, Sylvia Meadows stopped him in a soft, sweet, and alluring tone. "Mr. Thorne? I can't. Aren't you going to accompany Madam? It's freezing out here, and she's been waiting for a while." "Shut up, get down." Julian Thorne cut her off coldly, said nothing more, but possessed her again, beginning his next conquest. This time, Willow Astore couldn't listen anymore. She stumbled away, her face pale, turning to leave. Returning home, she silently began to sort through all the memories related to Julian Thorne from over the years. Their photos, all the gifts he had given her, the matching items they had chosen together as symbols of their love. And the wedding dress, wedding photos, wedding ring. She packed all those things into a box, then had someone move it to the backyard. After the servants had all left, she expressionlessly took out a lighter and set the box ablaze. Finally, she turned her gaze to the garden behind. There, Julian Thorne had once personally planted a large patch of roses for her. When he had planted them, he had smiled, holding her in his arms. "Sweetheart, roses represent pure love. You were the first girl to capture my heart and the only one I ever wanted to marry. My love for you is pure and flawless." What a pure and flawless love. Thinking of the scene she had just witnessed, she gave a sarcastic smile and set the entire rose garden on fire. Flames shot into the sky, instantly consuming the vast expanse of romantic roses. She stood there, coldly watching the flames devour all the memories between them. "Julian Thorne, the roses will not grow again, and between us, there is no future." Seeing the entire backyard reduced to ruins, she turned and went back to her room, starting to pack her luggage. As she was halfway through packing, a rush of urgent footsteps suddenly came from outside. Before she could react, the bedroom door was slammed open. Julian Thorne, his forehead beaded with sweat, rushed in like a madman. Only when he saw Willow Astore safe in the room did he finally breathe a sigh of relief. "Sweetheart, why did you leave alone secretly? Do you know I almost went mad looking for you?" His voice was filled with lingering fear, but she just looked at him without saying anything. In that quiet moment, he finally saw the clothes spread out in the walk-in closet. Instantly, his mind buzzed, his entire brain seemed to crash, and he could only hear his own voice, trembling to the extreme. "Why are you packing? Where are you going?" Chapter 5. The panic in Julian Thorne's eyes didn't seem feigned, but to Willow Astore, it was merely laughable. Wouldn't her departure just make room for Sylvia Meadows? Why was he putting on such a terrified act? But in the end, she didn't voice these thoughts, merely replying calmly, "I saw you weren't back yet, and it was getting cold, so I left first. As for these clothes, the seasons are changing, so I was just organizing them." Hearing her say this, Julian Thorne's anxiously suspended heart suddenly settled. He looked as if he had just narrowly escaped death, and with a mixture of relief and lingering panic, he hugged her tightly. "It's good you're not angry with me. It was my fault. I shouldn't have been on the phone for so long. I shouldn't have left you there alone. From now on, don't do this kind of packing yourself, okay? You really scared me just now. I thought you were going to leave me. Sweetheart, I'm so scared. Don't leave me. I'll die, I really will." Willow Astor didn't respond to his words. As she lowered her head, she noticed dust marks on the knees of his impeccably tailored, expensive suit pants. Clearly, he had been so anxious looking for her after discovering she was gone that he had stumbled when he entered. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She had only been gone for an hour, and he was this frantic. What if, not long from now, he discovered she had disappeared permanently? What would he do then? Julian Thorne's behavior always gave her the impression that he still loved her very much. Yet paradoxically, he was also the one involved with someone else. "I'm not angry. Business is important." She shook her head, as if his attitude didn't matter at all. But these few short words made a sliver of unease rise in his heart, and he immediately refuted her. "No, business isn't important. Nothing is important. Nothing in this world is more important than you." He held her tightly in his arms, afraid she would disappear if he loosened his grip for even a second. "Willow, if I've done anything wrong, you can hit me. Scold me anything, just don't leave me." His choked, vulnerable demeanor would have moved anyone else to pity, but she merely reached out and pushed him away. "I'm tired. I need to rest." All right, then let's go to sleep." At this point, Julian Thorne dared not contradict Willow Astor. Whatever she said, went. For the next few days, he stayed home with her and didn't go out, until one day he suddenly received a phone call. She didn't know what was said on the other end, but his expression instantly became grave. From that day on, he would make calls to others, thinking he was being discreet and hiding it from her. He would even sneak out in the middle of the night. Until one day, a friend from their circle was getting married and planned a pre-wedding party, repeatedly urging Julian Thorne to attend. Since getting married, Julian Thorne had turned down all social engagements to spend time with Willow Astor, including gatherings with his closest friends. Normally, he wouldn't go, but seeing Willow Astor's recent melancholy, he thought of taking her out to lift her spirits. So, with a mixture of coaxing and pleading, he managed to get her out of the house. Although it was a gathering of friends, throughout the event, Julian Thorne's eyes never left Willow Astor. He didn't dare let her drink alcohol, so he ordered every kind of fruit juice the club had, tasted each one, selected her favorite, and placed it in front of her. He was afraid she wouldn't enjoy the men's conversations and would be bored sitting alone. So he had a large array of snacks and a tablet with shows prepared for her. He even peeled fruit for her himself and placed it within her reach. She didn't like the smell of smoke, so he forbade everyone from smoking. She liked quiet, so he had all the music turned off. He even followed her to the restroom, ostensibly to ensure her safety. The onlookers were all dumbfounded. Chapter 6. Felix Finch, the host of the party, looked at Julian Thorne, whose eyes were solely on Willow Astor, and teased, "JT, you spoil her so much it's almost a crime, no wonder you're at the top of the world's most eligible bachelors list. Look, I'm getting married soon too. Why don't you teach me a thing or two about pampering my wife?" Julian Thorne never shied away from any topic concerning Willow Astor. Hearing Felix Finch's question, he replied nonchalantly while peeling a pomegranate for Willow, "Give your wife whatever she wants, send her whatever she needs. Keep things fresh and romantic, spend a lot of time with her, always show her you care, give her your entire life." As he listed the things he had done, Felix Finch waved his hands dismissively. "I really can't be that kind of perfect husband. Forget it." At this, the others burst into laughter. "Old Felix, it seems you don't love your wife as much as JT loves Mrs. T. Look at you guys, don't compare me to the gold standard." While the group was chatting animatedly, someone suddenly spoke up with a smile, but not in English, it was Italian. "JT, you've been spending all your time with Mrs. T these days. What about your pregnant secretary on the side?" The sudden switch in language made Willow Astor freeze. She instinctively turned to look at Julian Thorne, but his expression hadn't changed at all. He simply continued the conversation with the man in fluent Italian. "I spend the days with Willow and the nights with Sylvia Meadows." His answer made everyone present slap their thighs and roar with laughter. "We told you, men like us, who doesn't have 2 or 3 women on the side? We used to try to set you up, JT, but you always refused. Looks like this little secretary is quite the charmer. Not only did she make our resident wife doting fanatic, JT, break his vows, but she also got pregnant by him. Speaking of which, JT, how many positions does your little secretary know?" His expression unchanged, he lazily stated a number, 82. The laughter, which had just subsided, erupted once more. "Damn, impressive, no wonder she could hook our usually steadfast JT, she must be pretty good, huh?" Julian Thorne smirked and uttered 4 words coolly, "Can't get enough." The eyes of the men present lit up instantly, and the roars of laughter grew louder. Seeing the atmosphere becoming increasingly raucous, Julian Thorne finally raised his eyes coldly to stop their teasing. "Keep it down. Don't let Willow hear. Don't worry, JT Mrs. T doesn't understand Italian. We know our limits." He didn't continue this topic. Feeling the person beside him tremble, he quickly took off his jacket and carefully draped it over her. "Sweetheart, are you cold? Is this better?" The familiar scent of his cologne wafted over, but it failed to soothe her emotions. Willow Astor looked up at the tender man before her, her voice trembling. "What were you just talking about?" Julian Thorne smiled, patting her hair affectionately. "Just some work stuff. We all studied in Italy for a while, so we got used to speaking Italian. It must be boring for you, right? Your husband will tell them to stop right away, okay?" Julian Thorne's warm fingertips rested on her hair. She looked at his gentle face, no different from usual, and felt a chill run through her entire body. He didn't know that, in order to better integrate into his world, she had taught herself Italian long ago. Therefore, she had understood everything they had just discussed. She understood that his frequent phone calls and late-night outings these days were to spend time with the pregnant Sylvia Meadows. She understood that he couldn't get enough of Sylvia Meadows. She understood even more clearly that everyone around him knew about Sylvia Meadows' existence, and she alone had been kept in the dark Chapter 7 because Willow Astor was still present. The party didn't last too long. Seeing that it was getting late, Julian Thorne took the initiative to end the gathering and was the first to leave the private room with Willow. Just as they reached downstairs, his phone rang. Glancing at the name on the screen, he instinctively moved away from her to answer the call. 3 minutes later, he hung up and looked at Willow Astor apologetically. "Willow, something urgent has come up at the company. Can I have the driver take you home first?" She looked at him steadily, not exposing his lie, but not agreeing to his suggestion either. "You can let the driver go back first. It's not far from here. I'd like to walk a bit and clear my head." Julian Thorne thought about it. It was indeed not far from the villa, and she had been cooped up at home recently, so a walk might do her good. He waved the driver away and got into another car himself. She watched the direction he drove off in, then hailed a taxi. "Follow that car in front." Julian Thorne's car didn't go to the company. Instead, it stopped in front of another apartment building. Willow Astor had just paid and gotten out of the cab when she turned around and saw Sylvia Meadows, her small baby bump visible, running out air ADASTNA from inside, rushing straight towards Julian Thorne. Julian Thorne wasn't flustered. With a smile, he used both hands to steadily catch her and pull her into his embrace. An unknowing observer might have sighed at their sweetness. Not far away, Willow Astor watched as Sylvia Meadows smiled and leaned close to his ear, whispering something that made Julian Thorne, oblivious to being outside, directly cup the back of her head and kiss her passionately. When they finally parted, Sylvia Meadows' eyes were alluring, much of her lipstick smudged. She bit her lip, making her look even more alluring. As their eyes met, their gazes intertwined. Unconsciously, the distance between them grew smaller, until they could clearly feel each other's breath. The next second, Sylvia Meadows cried out as Julian Thorne swept her up into his arms and headed towards the apartment. One arm around his neck, the other playfully patting his chest, she said shyly, "Stop fooling around, I'm pregnant." His eyes darkened. He leaned down and kissed her lips. "It's been 3 months, it's fine. Let the baby meet Daddy a little early." Sylvia Meadows was still feigning resistance. "No, I'm scared." "Don't be scared. It's been so long. Do you know how crazy I've been wanting you?" As he finished speaking, he carried Sylvia Meadows and quickly walked inside. Willow Astor didn't know how long she stood there until her phone rang in her bag. She opened it to find it was an unknown number. She knew who it was, so she answered. The other end was silent, only the rustling sound of clothes rubbing together. "Mr. Thorne, really. I can't take any more." The coquettish words came clearly through the phone's receiver into Willow Astor's ears, followed by a familiar man's voice, hoarse and teasing. There, see. You can take it, can't you?" Moans, gasps, mixed with some indistinct sounds, rose and fell continuously, making Willow Astor's eyes turn red. Dark clouds had gathered in the sky at some point. Large raindrops formed lines, hitting the ground, the leaves, creating a staccato patter of rain. In an instant, she was drenched. Whether it was rain or tears, her vision was completely blurred. She stood there blankly, wanting to leave, wanting to hang up the phone, but she didn't even have the strength to lift her feet. Chapter 8. Willow Astor listened outside all night, drenched in the rain all night, until dawn was breaking and her phone battery was about to die. Only then did she numbly walk away, hail a cab, and return to the villa. The maid, seeing her soaked to the bone, panicked instantly, quickly drew a hot bath for her, and brewed ginger tea to ward off the chill. But her consciousness was so blurred she could barely tell which way was up, let alone go upstairs by herself. A maid tentatively reached out and touched her forehead, only to find her body alarmingly hot. She immediately called Julian Thorne. When Julian Thorne rushed back after receiving the news, she had already fainted from the high fever. No matter how anxiously he called her name, she showed no reaction at all. He quickly carried her to the car and sped to the hospital. After receiving medication, Willow Astor finally regained consciousness. The first thing she saw upon opening her eyes was Julian Thorne, who had been keeping vigil by her bedside. He had dark circles under his eyes and stubble on his chin, clearly having not slept all night. Seeing her awake, the joy in his eyes was unconcealable. He took her hand that wasn't on an IV drip and placed it against his cheek, his voice filled with the relief of having her back. "Sweetheart, you're finally awake, finally awake." He stayed by her side the entire day, not leaving for a moment. He gave her water when she was thirsty, fed her when she was hungry. He was so attentive that even the nurse who came to change her IV couldn't help but praise him. But every evening, he would suddenly disappear, nowhere to be found. There were no other patients on this floor, so it was exceptionally quiet at night. Thus, when nurses occasionally passed by, their conversations were particularly distinct. "Did you hear? Mrs. Thorne had a fever, so Mr. Thorne booked this entire floor. There's a pregnant girl upstairs, and some mysterious tycoon booked that whole floor for her too. Both are such incredible men, I'm so envious of them. But it's strange, Mr. Thorne on this floor only appears during the day, and the man on that floor only shows up at night. Who knows, maybe it's a quirk of the rich." The sound of conversation faded as the nurses walked away. Willow Astor, still awake in her hospital room, had heard every word. She tried to smile, but couldn't, only an endless bitterness lingered in her heart. So, a person really could love two people at the same time. Another evening, after dinner, Willow Astor lay down on the hospital bed and closed her eyes to sleep. Julian Thorne didn't think much of it, just assumed she was tired. He tucked her in and didn't leave immediately, instead sitting there, waiting for her to fall sound asleep. She cooperated by closing her eyes, and soon, her breathing became even and steady. He gently called her name several times. Seeing no reaction, he tenderly kissed her forehead, quietly left the room and headed upstairs. He walked quickly, so he didn't see that someone was silently following him. Willow Astor followed Julian Thorne upstairs, watching him navigate several turns before entering a hospital room. Through the window on the door, she could clearly see the scene inside. Julian Thorne, who had just been meticulously caring for her, was now holding a bowl of porridge, coaxing Sylvia Meadows in a soft, gentle voice. "Sweetheart, have a little more. The baby can't go hungry, and neither can you." His tone was intimate, his expression gentle, no different from when he was deeply in love with her. She couldn't bear to watch any longer and turned, hurrying back downstairs. Just as she returned to her room, her phone chimed with a message notification. It was Sylvia Meadows. "Mrs. Thorne, why did you leave after watching for just a moment? Last time you listened to us all night, I thought you'd confront him directly. I didn't expect you to be so tolerant. You don't still think Mr. Thorne loves you, do you? If he loved you, how could I be pregnant? You don't know, do you? Mr. Thorne has been keeping me for a year. 365 days a year, we're in bed almost every day. That includes your birthday, the anniversary of when you first met, your wedding anniversary. After spending time with you, he rushes over to me, eager. He can't get enough of my body. 82 positions, he's tried them all on me. He's very vigorous. We've made love in hotels, offices, the Maybach, private clubs, even your marital bedroom. Oh, by the way, not long ago, someone in our circle took a fancy to me and wanted me to spend a night with him. When he found out, he went berserk, beat the man half to death, and then took me more than 10 times that night, forcing me to call him husband over and over, making me swear never to look at another man. If I remember correctly, you were still running a fever that day. He left you to come to me. Now we have a child. If you know what's good for you, don't cling to the title of Mrs. Thorne. Pack your things and leave. If you leave now, you can still maintain some dignity. Otherwise, once my child is born, you'll probably be kicked out. The messages came one after another, like bloodless daggers, piercing Willow Astor until she was raw. Tears flowed uncontrollably. She tremblingly wiped them away, but she could never smooth over her scarred heart. Julian Thorne, you said you would never betray me, you said you would love me for a lifetime, you said there would be no other woman in this life. Every single word, you were lying to me. Chapter 9, on the day Willow Astor was discharged from the hospital, Julian Thorne didn't appear. He only sent her a message saying he had something on and couldn't make it, and that he had arranged for the driver to pick her up. She didn't reply because, long before that, she had received a message from Sylvia Meadows. It was a photo. In the photo, Julian Thorne, impeccably dressed in a suit, showed none of the airs of a listed company's president as he personally helped Sylvia Meadows pack her luggage. Along with the photo came a sentence. "Don't wait. He's taking me and the baby home today." Willow Astor replied to no one, packed her luggage alone, and returned to the villa. From that day on, Sylvia Meadows' messages became like an inescapable plague, one picture a day, without interruption. Either a photo of Julian Thorne massaging her legs, or him peeling shrimp for her, or a photo of her entangled with him in his office. Every time after sending a photo, if she didn't respond, Sylvia would become somewhat exasperated and question her. "Willow Astor, why don't you reply to me? Why don't you question Julian? Can you really endure this? Our child will be born in a few months, and you can still pretend like you know nothing?" Willow Astor, however, remained silent. She printed out every photo Sylvia Meadows sent, and on the back of each one, she meticulously wrote down her thoughts. Day 1, she sent a photo of them kissing under a cherry blossom tree. That year, he confessed his love to me under a cherry blossom tree. He confessed 78 times, and I rejected him 78 times. Everyone said I was heartless, but that was because I was afraid of choosing the wrong person. Physical wounds can heal, but a wounded heart can never heal. I was afraid I would lose. Now it seems I indeed chose wrong. Julian Thorne, you made me lose spectacularly. Day 2, she sent a photo of them watching fireworks together, him putting a ring on her finger under the fireworks. At 17, he said fireworks should only be watched with the person you love, and rings should only be given to the person you love. But at 27, he forgot it all. Day 3, she sent a photo of them intimately entangled. If he had told me he had someone else in his heart, I would have been sad, heartbroken, but I would never have clung to him. But he shouldn't have lied to me. Julian Thorne, my heart aches so much, so much. So I am leaving. On the 7th day, Willow Astor consulted with her lawyer and drafted a divorce agreement. She placed the photos she had printed out these past few days, the intimate video she had previously recorded, and a signed divorce agreement, all into a gift box. The moment she closed the lid of the gift box, her phone suddenly rang. "Mrs. Astor, all your personal information has been successfully erased. From this moment on, the person known as Willow Astor no longer exists in this world." At this moment, a smile of liberation finally appeared on her pale face. "Thank you for helping me erase everything." The next second, the door was suddenly pushed open. "Erase what?" She looked back and saw Julian Thorne standing at the door, whom she hadn't seen for days. Fortunately, he probably hadn't heard everything. That question was likely just a casual inquiry. So she gave a faint smile. "Nothing, you misheard." Julian Thorne indeed didn't press further. He simply extended a long arm and pulled her into his embrace. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, I haven't spent much time with you lately. Once things settle down, I'll have more time." He kissed her hair tenderly, but she suddenly thought of the recent photos Sylvia Meadows had sent her of Julian Thorne accompanying her to buy matching parent-child outfits. Her eyes filled with mockery. "Since you're so busy, why did you suddenly come back today?" Julian Thorne tapped her nose playfully. "You forgot. Tomorrow is our wedding anniversary. I've prepared a big surprise for you." Willow Astor shook her head and handed him the gift box from the side. "I haven't forgotten. I've prepared a big surprise for you too." Hearing her say this, surprise flashed in Julian Thorne's eyes. He was about to open it eagerly when, just then, his phone rang. On the screen that lit up fleetingly, she clearly saw Sylvia Meadows' name. A minute later, he hung up and walked over. "Sweetheart, something came up at the company." As if she had anticipated it, her expression was calm, without any attempt to make him stay. "Business is important, you should go." Hearing this, Julian Thorne froze. If it were before, when he hadn't spent quality time with her for a long while, and then had to leave again immediately after returning, even though she would still say business was important and wouldn't stop him, she wouldn't have been so calm. But he remembered what Sylvia Meadows had said on the phone just now. After a moment's hesitation, he still chose to leave. "Willow, I'll be back soon. Then we'll exchange surprises." Watching his receding figure, she didn't try to keep him. She didn't know if he would be surprised by her gift, but her gift would certainly be surprising enough for him. After Julian Thorne's car had completely driven away, Willow Astor turned, went back to her room, and took out the luggage she had packed long ago. The suitcase wasn't heavy, and she didn't make much noise as she dragged it out. She left the villa and got into a car without alerting any of the servants. Through the car window, that home gradually disappeared from her sight. The moment the car drove far away, she seemed to sense something and looked back. In a daze, it was as if she saw the 17-year-old Julian Thorne standing there, tears in his eyes. He smiled at her, his eyes crinkling. "Sweetheart, don't forgive him. Don't look back." She withdrew her gaze, smiled with reddened eyes, and didn't look back again. Chapter 10. For some reason, as Julian Thorne drove to Sylvia Meadows' apartment, his eyelids kept twitching violently. He sped all the way to her apartment. Rushing in, he saw Sylvia Meadows wearing only a thin nightgown and realized that her claim of having fallen was a lie. He frowned deeply, extremely displeased. "Have I spoiled you so much lately that you've forgotten your place? To spend time with you, how long has it been since I properly accompanied Willow? And you dare to lie to me about the baby?" Being reprimanded the moment he arrived, Sylvia Meadows' eyes instantly filled with tears. Her body went limp as she leaned against Julian Thorne, pouting, her voice full of grievance. "I just missed you, and the baby wanted to see his daddy too. If you don't come, he keeps fussing and I can't help it." Seeing her like this, Julian Thorne's anger instantly dissipated, and he sighed heavily. He was always helpless against Sylvia Meadows when she acted this way. After all, wasn't it because he initially liked her coquettishness that he had maintained this relationship with her? Unlike Willow Astor, Sylvia had experienced poverty, so she knew how to be the perfect kept woman for a wealthy young master. She was open, coquettish, soft-bodied, and easy to push over, possessing a girlish charm and bold in bed. These were things Willow Astor, who subconsciously closed herself off due to childhood trauma, would never do. Seeing his anger subside, she clung to him, stood on her tiptoes, and planted another kiss on his face, a shy smile on her lips. "Julian, listen, without you, my heart feels so flustered." Sylvia Meadows tried to pull his head towards her chest. If it were before, he would have complied and leaned in. But now, even though he had confirmed she and the baby were fine, the inexplicable panic in his heart hadn't vanished. Suddenly, he remembered Willow Astor's unusual behavior when he left. It seemed like she had been facing him with that calm, emotionless expression for a long time, as if whatever he did had nothing to do with her. Thinking of this, his panic intensified. With a slight exertion of force, he pushed the seemingly boneless Sylvia Meadows onto the sofa. She, who had been pampered and doted on since her pregnancy was discovered, was suddenly treated so violently and was still a bit stunned. The man before her had already straightened his suit and walked some distance away. "Julian," her cry was swallowed by the darkness. He seemed not to hear it. When she rushed after him, she only heard him drop a sentence, "Don't cause trouble. I promised Willow I'd spend these few days with her. Sylvia, be good." Julian Thorne didn't pause at all, directly opening the car door and getting in. Sylvia Meadows didn't even have time to say a word to keep him. All she saw was the taillights of his car disappearing in a cloud of dust. Thinking of him, mentioning Willow Astor at the end made her grind her teeth in hatred. She stomped her foot in frustration before turning back into her room. Meanwhile, Julian Thorne sped all the way, cutting the half-hour drive down to 15 minutes. When he returned to the villa, the bedroom lights were already off. "Willow, are you asleep?" he asked tentatively, but received no reply. Turning on the light, he saw the bed was empty. Only the anniversary gift Willow had said she would give him still sat on the bedside table. He called out a few more times, still no response. Unable to contain his curiosity, he walked over and opened the gift box. The first thing that met his eyes was a paper document. A few words were faintly printed on it, but they were completely obscured by the photos on top of the document. The photos were face down, each with a sentence written on the back. At that moment, he seemed to hear his own heart pounding. Were they photos of them together, or some other photos? And what was that document? With a heart full of questions, Julian Thorne took out all the photos and the document. His excited, joyful mood suddenly froze when he saw the words on the back of the photos. He massages another woman's legs. He makes porridge for another. He peels shrimp for another. He shops at a baby store with another woman. I wonder if, while doing these things, he ever remembers our past memories, remembers the promises he once made to me, that he would give me a unique love, that he would never betray me in this life. He must have forgotten. Chapter 11. His hands trembled as he flipped over the photos. Each one clearly showed his face, undeniable. Flipping to the bottom, after removing all the photos, the 5 large words blocked on the document were finally fully revealed: divorce papers. Divorce? The moment he saw these 2 words, Julian Thorne's mind went blank. He only knew he didn't want a divorce. He couldn't live without Willow Astor. He hadn't agreed to divorce her. Julian Thorne searched the entire second floor. Not only did he not find her, but he also discovered that not only was all of Willow Astor's luggage gone, but even the items that held their shared memories were missing. The unease in his heart intensified. He turned and went downstairs, directly finding the villa's housekeeper and asking him to gather all the servants. Only then did he try to calm himself and question them one by one. Did anyone see where Madame went today? The servants, suddenly called together, looked at each other, thought carefully, and then exchanged glances with those around them, only to see confusion in each other's eyes. None of them had seen where Willow Astor had gone or in which direction she had headed. More accurately, they didn't even know Willow Astor had left. Seeing their expressions, Julian Thorne could no longer suppress his anger and roared. "Get out, all of you, get out." The employer was furious, and the servants and housekeeper dared not linger. They all hurried away, and in the blink of an eye, only Julian Thorne remained in the hall. Rage consumed his rationality. All he could think about was finding Willow Astor. But he was so flustered that when he tried to take out his phone to call her, his hand was too weak to even hold it properly, nearly dropping it several times. Fortunately, since he got Willow Astor's number, her contact had always been pinned, so even in his panic, he could easily find her number and dial. But after a long series of rings, Willow Astor's familiar voice didn't answer. Instead, a mechanical female voice said, "Sorry, the number you have dialed is currently busy." The message stunned him. In disbelief, he hung up and redialed. The mechanical prompt remained unchanged. Had she blocked him? Julian Thorne couldn't believe his ears. He and Willow Astor had been in love for 3 years, married for 4, a total of 7 years of relationship. He couldn't believe she would silently sign the divorce papers, block his number, and disappear. When one number didn't go through, he found another, his voice filled with anxiety and anger. "Find Willow Astor's whereabouts for me now, immediately." After instructing his assistant, he looked down, his gaze returning to the pile of photos. To be able to take so many clear photos and tell Willow Astor what each photo corresponded to, he could only think of one person, Sylvia Meadows. Damn it, rage flared in his eyes, and his voice was tinged with a teeth-gritting intensity. At this moment, Julian Thorne didn't quite know how to describe his current mood. He had clearly told Sylvia Meadows that she could have whatever she wanted at other times, but there was one bottom line. She couldn't cause trouble in front of Willow. He had truly spoiled her rotten, and now, emboldened by her pregnancy, she dared to expose this to Willow Astor. But then again, he felt Willow Astor's actions were too unreasonable. Yes, it was his fault for keeping another woman outside, but hadn't he treated her well enough? He had merely made a mistake that all men in the world make. Why could his other friends' girlfriends tolerate them having countless women, yet when he had only one, she had to run away from home? Mr. Thorne, Madam's identity information was erased half a month ago. We can't find any trace of her. Assistant Hobbs recalled his shock when he received the news that Willow Astor's identity had been erased and that she was completely untraceable. He couldn't imagine Julian Thorne's reaction upon hearing this. Reporting it now, his voice trembled. She directly erased her identity information. Madam hadn't left herself any way out. He didn't know what had happened to make Madam take such a drastic step. And on this end of the line, when Julian Thorne heard this, he felt a snap in his ears. The last string called rationality completely broke. He shot up, unable to believe what he had just heard. Willow Astor erased her identity information? No, how could that be? He had only kept one woman on the side. Even if she wanted to be angry, run away from home, or demand a divorce, how could she just erase all her information and leave? Shouldn't she be hiding somewhere, waiting for him to find her, apologize to her, promise her he would break up with Sylvia Meadows and never do such a thing again, and then come home with him? Her anger subsided. How could she just erase her identity? Chapter 12, Julian Thorne slumped back onto the sofa, his eyes filled with bewilderment. But for some reason, at this very moment, he suddenly remembered the day Willow Astor had first started acting strangely. Her eyes red, she had looked up at him and asked, "Julian, do you remember what I said on our wedding day?" "Don't you remember?" I said, "You pried open my heart with the most ardent love. If one day you stop loving me, tell me plainly. I won't cling to you, but if you deceive me, I will disappear forever and you will never find me again." So, she had already found out back then. She was already preparing to leave. So, everything she said was true. But he had never stopped loving her. His heart had only momentarily strayed. But from beginning to end, the person he loved most was always her, Willow. How could you be so cruel? He covered his face with his hands, suppressed sobs escaping through his fingers. The distant servants watched Julian Thorne, sometimes standing, sometimes sitting, sometimes furious, sometimes crying. A long-serving maid shook her head. This was the first time she had seen Julian Thorne so openly emotional. But she dared not say anything, merely ushering the other servants away, leaving this space for Julian Thorne. Once Julian Thorne emerged from his grief, he silently stood up, went out, and got into his car, all in one smooth motion. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on Sylvia Meadows' apartment door. She got up irritably to open it, only to be startled by the sight of Julian Thorne, his eyes bloodshot. But in an instant, the displeasure on her face was replaced by surprise, a glint of light in her eyes. "Julian, didn't you say you were going to accompany Madam today? Why are you here again?" Her shy and timid demeanor didn't arouse his pity. Julian Thorne silently walked past her into the living room, then pulled out a thick stack of photos and threw them on the table. A cold, sharp voice followed as his icy gaze fell upon her. "I'll give you a chance to explain." Sylvia Meadows was puzzled, but seeing his expression, a sense of unease crept into her heart. She slowly edged closer to him, then froze completely when she saw the stack of photos clearly. She admitted that when she sent those photos to Willow Astor, it was with the intention of provoking her, making her give up and leave on her own. But Sylvia Meadows had never imagined that Willow Astor, who seemed so timid and weak, who could endure even hearing them make love without saying a word, would actually print out these photos. Chapter 13, Julian. Sylvia Meadows opened her mouth, her voice laced with apprehension, guilt, and unease when she spoke again. "I don't know what's going on with these photos." Her eyes darted around, not daring to meet Julian Thorne's gaze. He wasn't blind, he could see it clearly. Moreover, he had already come to a conclusion before seeking out Sylvia Meadows. Her denial to him was merely a feeble excuse. "Sylvia Meadows, haven't I told you? I can give you anything you want, but there's one bottom line. You must not cause trouble in front of Willow." He leaned back against the sofa, looking at her, his eyes narrowed, the dangerous meaning in them making her heart pound with fear. She dared not admit what she had done, but seeing his expression, she knew he had already made up his mind. Her thoughts raced. After a long pause, she finally made a decision and knelt before Julian Thorne with a thud, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. "Julian, I was wrong. I just love you too much, that's why I made a mistake. Please forgive me this once, okay? I promise I'll be good." As she spoke, Sylvia Meadows' eyes were already red and swollen, her pitiful appearance evoking deep sympathy. Yet, the man before her, upon hearing her affirmative answer, his eyes grew even colder. He leaned down, his hand shooting out to grip her chin. He applied slight pressure, leaving red marks on her cheeks, making her look even more pitiable. "Give you another chance? Ha," he sneered. If Sylvia Meadows hadn't taken matters into her own hands and brought this before Willow, would his Willow have left so quietly, going to such extremes to prevent him from finding her, even erasing her identity? He gives Sylvia Meadows another chance, but who would bring his Willow back? Thinking of this, a smile played on Julian Thorne's lips, and his gaze toward Sylvia Meadows softened slightly. Just as she thought this meant he was about to relent, he suddenly let go of her, took out his phone, and dialed a number. "Book an abortion for me for tomorrow morning. The sooner, the better." The call ended. His gaze returned to Sylvia Meadows. Upon hearing the words abortion, her eyes were filled with nothing but panic. She shook her head incessantly. "No, don't. Julian, this is our child. You can't be so heartless, please. I'll really be obedient. Don't abort my baby." The panic in her voice was no longer feigned. Seeing him get up to leave, she quickly hugged his legs, kneeling on the floor and shuffling forward with Julian Thorne's steps. But he showed no mercy, prying her fingers off one by one before turning and walking away, leaving Sylvia Meadows behind, crying until she was out of breath. When the apartment door slammed shut with a bang, her face had turned deathly pale, completely devoid of color. She sat there, lifeless, on the cold living room floor. The chill from the floor seeped into her bones, but it couldn't compare to the coldness in her heart. Dawn was breaking. Sylvia Meadows, who hadn't slept all night, had swollen red eyes. She turned to look at the night sky outside the window, her hand unconsciously caressing her barely showing belly. She had found out she was pregnant half a month ago. At that time, she had been somewhat apprehensive, unsure if Julian Thorne would choose to keep the child. After all, everyone in the city knew that Julian Thorne loved Willow Astor. Even though she had maintained an intimate relationship with him for some time, he had never promised her a formal status. But he had said, "Let's have it. It's my first child. I'll make this child the rightful eldest grandchild of the Thorne family." He had even thought of names for their child the night he learned of her pregnancy. The boy would be named Ryan, and the girl, Mia. Sylvia Meadows had naively believed that Julian Thorne saying their child would be the Thorne family's rightful eldest grandchild meant he had fallen in love with her too, that she now had the capital to be willful. So she began to greedily ask for more of his companionship, more of his care. And she wanted a status that would allow her to stand by his side openly, not as his secretary, but as his lover, his girlfriend, his wife. But now, Julian Thorne had shown her the reality. She was wrong, nothing more than a complete joke. Chapter 14. Sylvia Meadows was unreconciled. How was she inferior to Willow Astor? In terms of looks and figure, she believed she was not inferior to Willow Astor. Even in bed, she pleased Julian Thorne more. So why did he still abandon her for Willow Astor? She couldn't understand, and Julian Thorne didn't give her much time to think. Glancing at the clock on the wall, its hands were already approaching 7. Perhaps it was truly a mother-child connection. Sylvia Meadows, caressing her belly, seemed to feel the child's unease. She felt as if she could hear her child crying out to her for help, saying, "Mommy, I don't want to leave you, please save me." Sylvia Meadows looked again at the closed door. After only a moment's hesitation, she forced herself to stand up, quickly packed a few clothes, gathered all the valuables in the apartment, then withdrew a sum of money from the card Julian Thorne had once given her and hastily took a taxi to the airport. She wouldn't stay here waiting for him to send her to the hospital. She would take their child and flee far away. Only when she had safely given birth, when Julian Thorne could no longer harm her child, would she return. But Sylvia Meadows forgot that it was incredibly easy for Julian Thorne to track her movements. He had guessed what she was up to when she suddenly withdrew a large sum of money. He immediately had someone check Sylvia Meadows's spending records and, sure enough, found that she had bought a plane ticket abroad that morning. He directly dispatched people to the airport to intercept her. Meanwhile, Sylvia Meadows was stopped just as she was about to board the plane. Initially, the reason given was that prohibited items were found in her carry-on luggage. She went with them to find her checked baggage, but as they walked, she realized they had surrounded her and were leading her out of the airport. She refused to go with them and was forcibly pushed into a car. Only when she saw the familiar driver and assistant Hobbs, with whom she had worked for some time, did she realize they were all Julian Thorne's men. And her suitcase, which she had clearly checked in, was now being pulled out and stuffed into the trunk. At this moment, Sylvia Meadows's heart was filled only with utter despair. She had merely sent a few photos, and he was so ruthless, leaving her no way out. City Central Hospital. Sylvia Meadows had never imagined that, just a few days ago, she was the object of envy in this very hospital, a woman with a loving and doting boyfriend, who, only 3 months into her pregnancy, had booked an entire floor for her exclusive rest. Today, she was being escorted to the hospital for an abortion. She watched as Julian Thorne expressionlessly signed his name on the surgical consent form. Then, a few nurses approached her. Fear and panic instantly flooded her heart, making her tremble uncontrollably. "Julian," she clutched his sleeve, tears blurring her vision, her choked voice sounding exceptionally pitiful. She wanted to beg him to keep the child, but he mercilessly pulled his sleeve away. "Secretary Meadows, who gave you the audacity to call your superior by his first name?" His detached attitude, coupled with Julian Thorne's words, left Sylvia Meadows stunned. Only when the nurses pulled her into the operating room did she finally realize what he meant. Not only did he not want their child, but he also wanted to sever all ties with her. Realizing this, Sylvia Meadows immediately began to struggle frantically. The nurses, not expecting her sudden outburst, were momentarily unable to restrain her, and she broke free. Amidst the commotion, it was the anesthesiologist who quickly administered the anesthetic. Only after struggling for a while longer did she gradually lose her strength. Chapter 15, to prevent her from moving around again, the anesthesiologist had given her a sufficient dose of medication. Soon, Sylvia Meadows felt her consciousness begin to blur. The operating room lights and the white ceiling reflected each other. She weakly closed her eyes, yet still felt the lights painfully glaring. It hurt so much that her tears flowed uncontrollably. Julian Thorne, he's truly so heartless. She regretted it. She regretted falling in love with him. It was her fault. She shouldn't have acted so recklessly, emboldened by his temporary affection. She shouldn't have fallen in love with Julian Thorne. She shouldn't have come to his side. As she thought this, her consciousness gradually faded until it completely disappeared. She didn't know how much time had passed when she woke up, already wheeled out of the operating room. The hospital room was empty, except for her. Not long after, the doctor on rounds, along with a nurse for changing dressings, came to her room. Seeing her awake, the doctor inquired about her condition and gave a few instructions. She answered and nodded obediently, showing no sign of the frantic struggling in the operating room. After the nurse finished changing her dressing and was about to leave, she suddenly paused, as if remembering something, and looked back at her. "The medical expenses Mr. Thorne paid only cover up to tonight. The remaining amount is insufficient for you to continue staying in a private room. If you can't make up the difference in time, we'll have to transfer you to a general ward." She forced a bitter smile, which, combined with her pale complexion, made her look exceptionally desolate. "Then transfer me to a general ward. Melbourne." After getting off the plane, Willow Astor didn't choose to settle here directly. She still had a considerable amount of savings, but because her bank cards were still linked to her old identity, she was afraid of being discovered. So for the time being, she only used the cash she had exchanged before leaving her home country. Hailing a taxi, booking a hotel, she checked the time. It was still early, but after such a long flight, Willow Astor decided to return to the hotel first. She planned to explore the nearby areas for a while and had already done a lot of research and made plans. In the past, when she was with Julian Thorne, her life basically revolved around him. He was busy starting his business, busy with work. Even if he could occasionally find time, They could only explore nearby. For Willow Astor back then, traveling abroad was an extravagant dream. Later, when Julian Thorne reconciled with his family, he needed to manage the Thorne Industries assets while also making the JW Group, named after them, increasingly successful. He became even busier. Initially, he would remember her love for travel and, despite being busy, would try his best to make time to go out with her. But later, it more often became him bringing back local specialties and expensive gifts from places she wanted to visit, telling her he really couldn't get away at the moment and couldn't accompany her to those places. Willow Astor understood his exhaustion, so she never said anything and would even give him sufficient care when he returned, weary. Unfortunately, he ultimately chose to betray their relationship. But thankfully, she could finally live for herself now. She could go wherever she wanted, stay as long as she wanted. Willow Astor didn't regret loving Julian Thorne. Even though their ending wasn't good, she couldn't deny the initial thrill he had given her. People always make mistakes. When you realize you're wrong, you correct it. The man she loved was no longer the same as he was at the beginning, and she had the courage to withdraw and start anew. After resting well, Willow Astor did a lot of research. Melbourne had many places to visit and see. She also planned to go to other places after she had her fill of Melbourne. Chapter 16, Julian Thorne didn't believe a person could suddenly vanish into thin air. Even if she had erased her records, her departure must have left some trace. If he couldn't find her in their home city, he had people search all over the country. If he couldn't find her domestically, he would search abroad. She had erased her records, not died. Julian Thorne was extremely determined. Even if it was like looking for a needle in a haystack, he would find Willow Astor. Since she couldn't be found after erasing her identity, she probably wouldn't choose to stay in the country, just like Sylvia Meadows, when she wanted to run, had subconsciously chosen to flee abroad. He just needed to investigate everyone who had left their home city to go abroad during that period. He would eventually find out where she had gone. Finally, after half a month, Julian Thorne traced her current location through a plane ticket from 2 weeks prior, and the financial transactions on one of Willow Astor's cards. He bought a plane ticket that very day and, after a flight of over 10 hours, finally landed in Melbourne. However, when he found the hotel Willow Astor had stayed at, he learned that she had checked out just 2 hours before his arrival. "Do you know where she went?" Julian Thorne subconsciously asked, only to realize after asking what a foolish question it was. She had already checked out. How would the hotel receptionist know where she was going? As expected, hearing his question, the receptionist shook her head. "We are not authorized to inquire about our guests' private information." The clue he had just found was broken again. Julian Thorne felt incredibly frustrated. If he had been a little faster, would he not have missed her? But now that the trail was completely cold, where else could he look for her? Somewhat unwilling to give up, he also checked into the same hotel. He spent his days visiting nearby attractions, and in doing so, he actually managed to gather some information. For instance, Willow Astor was now using an identity identical to her previous one. For instance, Willow Astor had made many friends while traveling alone abroad. Not only did she speak fluent English, but her Italian was also impeccable. This should have been good news, at least indicating that as long as she didn't run out of money, her life alone abroad wouldn't be too difficult. But at this moment, Julian Thorne remembered something else. Willow Astor's fluent Italian meant she couldn't have learned it just for communication on the fly. She must have studied it beforehand. And not long ago, when he had taken Willow Astor to Felix Finch's pre-wedding party, they had spoken about something in Italian right in front of her. The memory of that night suddenly flooded his mind, the conversation echoing in his head. "JT, you've been spending all your time with Willow these days. What about your pregnant secretary on the side?" "I spend the days with Willow and the nights with Sylvia Meadows." "You used to refuse no matter who we set you up with. Looks like you're quite satisfied with this one, even got her pregnant. Now you know the perks of having a bit on the side, huh?" "Hey, JT, how many positions does your secretary know?" 15. Julian Thorne suddenly remembered Willow Astor trembling that night. At the time, he had thought she couldn't stand the cold air in the private room. Looking back now, it was probably her disbelief at hearing her own husband and his friends openly discussing his infidelity, all while thinking they had her completely fooled. He stumbled, taking a step back, and fled in panic before he could even bid farewell to his Italian friend. Although the friend didn't know why he had reacted so strongly, he kindly reminded him, "When I was chatting with Mrs. Store, I heard her mention wanting to travel the world in the next few months. I recommended Italy to her. If you want to find her, you could try looking in Italy." Unfortunately, by the time the friend finished speaking, Julian Thorne had already run some distance. It was unclear if he had heard. Chapter 17, Julian Thorne heard, but he was momentarily timid. He was afraid that after all his painstaking efforts and energy to find her, she would no longer be willing to forgive him. Afraid that all his efforts during this time would ultimately be in vain. The fact that Willow Astor had secretly taught herself Italian truly surprised him, but upon reflection, he could roughly guess her intentions. His friends had spoken Italian in front of Willow Astor more than once. At those times, he always said it was because they had spent a long time in Italy and were used to speaking Italian. Each time, she would be the only one present who didn't understand Italian, the only one excluded. She had also mentioned wanting to learn Italian because she said she wanted to integrate into his circle. She said she didn't want to be an outsider in his world. What had Julian Thorne said back then? He had said, "It doesn't matter if you don't understand. It doesn't matter if you don't have common topics with those people. As long as we have each other, that's enough." And so, he had brushed it off. How could he have ever imagined that she would secretly learn Italian on her own? He had underestimated Willow Astor's love for him and overestimated his own love for Willow Astor. But now, he truly knew he was wrong, and he had already completely broken off relations with Sylvia Meadows. What about her? Would she still be willing to forgive him? Julian Thorne didn't know. In his bewilderment, his phone suddenly rang. It was Assistant Hobbs. Upon answering, he heard the cautious voice from the other end. "Mr. Thorne, people from the Thorne family are here. They say they want to see you. We really can't hold them off any longer." Julian Thorne let out a deep breath, his rationality finally returning somewhat with this call. He couldn't continue to be this dejected, nor could he keep hiding in Melbourne. Thorne Industries and JW Group were still in his hands. Even if he gave up Thorne Industries, he couldn't ignore JW Group. After all, it was the company that had witnessed his and Willow Astor's love. "Tell them, I'll be back today." After receiving a definite answer, Assistant Hobbs finally breathed a sigh of relief. Hanging up the phone, he looked at the displeased Mr. and Mrs. Thorne Sr. in the reception room. "I've already spoken with Mr. Thorne. He said he will be back today." During the time Julian Thorne stayed in Melbourne and then returned to his home country, Willow Astor traveled all over Italy alone. She went to Rome, Florence, the world-famous water city of Venice, and the fashion capital, Milan. Just when she was about to forget Julian Thorne, she suddenly received a fund transfer notification. After a long pause, she remembered using that card some time ago, which probably gave him the opportunity to slip through. Willow Astor frowned, not wanting any more entanglement with him, so she went to the bank and transferred the money back. Returning to the hotel that night, she couldn't help but sigh again. When she erased her identity information, it was with the intention of never being found by him again. But now, her whereabouts seemed to have been exposed. But she couldn't spend her whole life hiding in some corner just because of one Julian Thorne. If she was going to be found eventually, she thought, she would probably choose her favorite city to settle down in. Willow Astor didn't stay in Italy for long. The day after receiving that fund transfer, she bought a plane ticket to the next city. She still had many places she wanted to go. She wanted to visit more places and do more things she wanted to do before Julian Thorne actually found her. Perhaps because she quickened her pace, she hadn't encountered him or his people along the way. But Willow Astor didn't know that shortly after she left each city, Julian Thorne would appear at the hotel where she had stayed. Chapter 18, traveling the world was indeed an exhausting, expensive, and time-consuming affair. Even though Willow Astor had tried to speed up, by the time she had visited all the places she wanted to go and finally returned to Melbourne, 2 years had passed. Along the way, she had met a man named Theodore Theo Vance, and they had become travel companions. They got along very well, and upon learning their final destination was the same, they happily traveled together. They just didn't expect to encounter an unwelcome guest as soon as they landed in Melbourne. Ever since the first fund transfer was returned, Julian Thorne, as if his arduous search had finally received a response, began transferring money to her every few days. At first, she would return it. Later, perhaps because she also found it troublesome, when he transferred money, she would accept it. After all, it was free money, it would be foolish not to take it. And this gave him a signal, making him mistakenly believe that perhaps Willow Astor was no longer so angry. Looking back at her route, Julian Thorne inexplicably had an idea perhaps, in the end, she would return to Melbourne. So he estimated the time, and arrived in Melbourne a little early. This time, he was indeed not mistaken, but to his surprise, there was another man by her side. The man had a high-bridged nose, exquisite and deep-set features, and his light-colored eyes gave him an exotic handsomeness. His tall stature even made Julian Thorne look somewhat petite in comparison. Yet, standing next to Willow Astor, they looked strangely harmonious. After 2 years, finally seeing the person he had longed to see countless times in his dreams, Julian Thorne's eyes reddened slightly. He tried hard to ignore the overwhelmingly present man beside her. His voice choked when he spoke. "Willow." The moment Willow Astor saw Julian Thorne, her brows furrowed and didn't relax. Seeing him about to step forward, she instinctively took a step back. Noticing her resistance, Theodore's tall figure immediately stepped in front of Willow Astor, his gaze towards Julian Thorne becoming more guarded. "Hey, can't you see Willow doesn't like you?" Theodore's voice interrupted Julian Thorne's emotions. He looked up, his gaze meeting Theodore's, clearly seeing the hostility in Theodore's eyes. Coupled with the overly intimate Willow, it made his brows furrow even tighter, and his tone became unfriendly when he spoke. "And who are you? My business with Willow is none of your concern." Seeing his righteous demeanor, Theodore hesitated for a moment, instinctively glancing back at Willow Astor, but he still didn't step aside, keeping her protected behind him. He just didn't speak further. Seeing him dare not respond, Julian Thorne's expression showed a hint of triumph. That triumph didn't last long before Willow Astor's voice interrupted. "He's my boyfriend. Why can't he be involved in my affairs? And what right do you have to shout at my boyfriend?" The unwavering protectiveness in her tone pained Julian Thorne's heart. What was even harder for him to accept were the words, "my boyfriend," that she uttered. His eyes were full of shock and disbelief, which turned into grief when he met the coldness in her eyes. "Willow, I know I was wrong about what happened in the past, but I truly realize my mistake now. Besides, I haven't agreed to a divorce. How can you be with someone else?" Theodore didn't catch every word of their rapid English exchange, but he clearly heard Willow Astor's "my boyfriend." The tips of his ears quietly turned pink, but he didn't interrupt their argument, just silently observed her state from the side. Chapter 19. If Willow Astor showed even a hint of discomfort during their argument, he would unhesitatingly step in and take her away. As for the man who said they weren't divorced, who cared about him? "Willow, please forgive me this one time, okay? I promise you, I will never make the same mistake again. And I've already broken off all ties with Sylvia Meadows and even fired her from my company. Don't be angry with me anymore. Come home with me, please." He spoke with such sincerity that an uninformed observer might have chimed in, urging her to forgive him. Everyone except Theodore. He hadn't understood everything, only catching a few keywords, and then pieced together the truth of the story the man before him, with red-rimmed eyes, appearing to be the humble one begging for reconciliation, was actually a cheating scumbag pleading for his wife's forgiveness. He stood aside, sneered, and rolled his eyes at Julian Thorne. Julian Thorne saw it and was furious, but his priority now was to quickly appease Willow Astor and get her to go back with him, so he couldn't be bothered with Theodore. But Willow Astor looked at him, her face showing no emotion, only indifference. "Who you want to be with has nothing to do with me. All my identity information back in our home country has been erased. Whether you signed those divorce papers or not, there's no longer any relationship between us. As for Sylvia Meadows, whatever is between you and her has nothing to do with me either." She finished coldly and was about to pull Theodore past Julian Thorne to leave the airport. Just as she took a step, he suddenly reached out and grabbed her hand. His eyes were full of deep affection, his face etched with remorse and guilt. "But Willow, I really can't live without you. I truly love you. Are you really going to be this heartless? Won't you give me even one chance?" As he spoke, his voice even took on a hint of grievance, which made Willow Astor frown deeply. Even the hand he held broke out in thick goosebumps. Theodore, seeing this, directly gripped his wrist. With a slight squeeze, Julian Thorne yelped in pain and let go. Just as he was about to get angry, he saw Willow Astor pull Theodore further away, avoiding him like the plague. She couldn't be bothered with his heartache. Her eyes now held a hint of annoyance. "Julian Thorne, have you made enough of a scene?" The sudden rebuke stunned Julian Thorne. He seemed not to have expected her to speak so sharply to him for someone else. He opened his mouth, his throat dry, not knowing what to say. He was speechless, but Willow Astor had much to say. From the moment he had someone else by his side, to now when she had already chosen to let go and grant them their wish, he still pursued her relentlessly. Having just endured a long flight, Willow Astor was very tired. She wanted to rest, so initially she didn't want to remain at a standstill with him, just wanting to leave quickly. But since someone didn't want her to have her way, she decided to open up and voice all the words suppressed in her heart for years. "Julian Thorne, do you think this is amusing? Loyalty in marriage is a basic human decency. Even if you move in your circles where it's never been a concern, I told you. If one day you stopped loving me, just tell me directly. Don't lie to me. But you, did you ever take my words to heart? Even later, I reminded you again. If you had chosen to be honest with me then, perhaps we could have parted amicably. But you didn't. Julian Thorne, you were the one fooling around with someone else regardless of time or place. You were the one who, thinking I didn't understand Italian, was so brazen as to not even hide it in front of me. When I was sick with a fever, you couldn't stop worrying about Sylvia Meadows, so you arranged for her to be on the floor above me. What were you thinking in those moments? Were you thinking how charming you were, able to have a woman on each arm? Or how incredibly stupid I must be not to see through such a shoddy disguise? Chapter 20, Julian Thorne's face turned pale under her barrage of questions. He kept shaking his head, wanting to say it wasn't like that, but she merely sneered at his reaction. "What, you still want to say you love me? Having a child with another woman while supposedly loving me? Julian Thorne, your love is truly cheap." The moment her last sentence fell, his face completely lost all color. Only his eyes remained red. He looked at her pleadingly, his voice hoarse as he made his final explanation, begging for her mercy. "I didn't let Sylvia Meadows have my child. I took her to the hospital, I had the pregnancy terminated. I really know I was wrong. I truly haven't contacted her since. Willow, please believe me, okay?" She shook her head, a deep disgust hidden in her eyes. "I believe you really did terminate her pregnancy and haven't contacted her since. But Julian Thorne, do you know? It's this version of you that's so repulsive. The whole mess started because of you. You, who had a wife and a family, still went out to entice others, got someone pregnant, gave them false hopes. Yet, once things went wrong and the truth was exposed, you shifted all the blame onto others. I only blocked your phone number, not hers. So I know what happened to her. Sylvia Meadows, publicly denounced by you, President Thorne, as scheming and unemployable could she have a good ending. Having just lost her child. Then her job, ostracized by the entire upper-class circle, ridiculed, humiliated, thrown out onto the streets before she even recovered from the abortion, and finally losing her mind, only lucid occasionally. How ruthless, how imposing you are. I do dislike her. No one likes a homewrecker who flaunts her affair in front of the wife. But compared to her, I despise you more. If you had an ounce of responsibility, I had already stepped aside for you both. If you could have taken responsibility for her, for the child in her womb, I might have respected you a little. But you only shirk responsibility. You betrayed our marriage, and when she got pregnant, you used both her and the child as tools for your anger. But Julian Thorne, you are the one who most deserves retribution. After saying this, Willow Astor didn't look at his reaction again, but directly pulled Theodore away. Behind them, Julian Thorne watched their figures, leaning on each other, recede into the distance, his face as pale as paper. For 2 whole years, he had survived on his longing for her, never imagining that in her heart, he was so disgusting, so loathsome. Was he the main culprit? Was he the one who most deserved retribution? But really, had he committed such a heinous, unforgivable crime just by hiding Sylvia Meadows' existence from her? He had never lied about loving her. Julian Thorne didn't know how to describe his current feelings. He still couldn't let go of Willow Astor, but every time he thought of her expression when she left, he felt a pang of fear. Would she never forgive him? And that Sylvia Meadows, he hadn't intended to drive her to insanity. He just wanted to teach her a lesson. Everything Sylvia Meadows had was given by him: the affection, the money, the status, the capital for her arrogance, even the child was his gift to her. She made a mistake, drove away the person he loved most. Didn't she deserve punishment? He had merely taken back what he had once given Sylvia Meadows. How did that become ruthless, in Willow Astor's words? He didn't understand. Only when they were completely out of Julian Thorne's sight did Willow Astor abruptly release Theodore's hand. The sensation of her slender, smooth hand slipping away from his palm made Theodore instinctively clench his fist, trying to hold on, but he only grasped air. A feeling of loss washed over him. He suppressed it with effort, managing to keep his expression from betraying him. Only a slight confusion showed on his face as he looked at her and asked, "What's wrong?" Her face flushed red, her shy appearance directly striking his soft spot, making his heart pound. But her next words instantly calmed his racing heart. "I'm sorry, saying you were my boyfriend earlier was just a spur-of-the-moment thing to handle the situation. I apologize if I overstepped." Understanding Willow Astor's meaning, though a little disappointed, Theodore still waved his hand. "It's all right. You said that to defend me too, didn't you? Besides, seeing a lady being harassed and not offering help isn't what a gentleman should do." After clearing the air, the two returned to their initial mode of interaction. But seeing Willow Astor, who was clearly much more relaxed around him, a sense of satisfaction filled his heart. Chapter 21, Julian Thorne returned to his home city that same night. Driving, he followed the GPS to the care facility where Sylvia Meadows was now staying. Dilapidated, dirty, noisy, these were his first impressions. Julian Thorne, dressed in an expensive tailored suit, attracted everyone's attention the moment he stepped inside. It was simply because his appearance was utterly out of place here. Most people who came here had little money, no family to look after them, and were unable to care for themselves, thus forced into this facility. But Julian Thorne clearly did not look poor. With a casual flick of a few banknotes, he had the facility's caregivers fawning over him, asking who he was looking for, and even offering to bring out anyone he wanted to see, saying it was dirty inside. "Take me to see Sylvia Meadows." He coldly refused their suggestions and walked resolutely inside. Hearing the name Sylvia Meadows, the caregiver responsible for her hurried forward, her sharp eyes darting around, trying to discern his attitude towards Sylvia from his expression. After all, that Sylvia Meadows was rumored to be no good either. Originally a rich man's mistress who got pregnant, she tried to usurp the original wife's position, but ended up angering the rich man, who then reduced her to her current state. Looking at this man's appearance, he seemed more like Sylvia Meadows's former patron. But if he just wanted to see Sylvia Meadows's current miserable state, why bother coming in person? Walking ahead, she couldn't help but purse her lips. People like them from the lower class really couldn't fathom the minds of the wealthy. If you asked her, that patron wasn't a good person either. If you say he liked Sylvia Meadows, yet when things came to light, he could be ruthless enough to push her to this state. If you say he didn't like Sylvia Meadows, yet he got her pregnant and allowed her to drive away the original wife. Unable to guess his thoughts, the caregiver couldn't be bothered to try anymore. Soon, she led him to Sylvia Meadows's room, her face obsequious. "Sylvia Meadows is in here, the bed by the window." Julian Thorne glanced at the caregiver, casually handing over a few more $100 bills. The caregiver beamed so widely her eyes nearly disappeared, respectfully ushering him in. Who said this patron was bad? This patron was very good. As soon as Julian Thorne walked into the ward, he couldn't help but frown. Since most of the patients were unable to care for themselves, apart from the delirious shouting and clamor, there was also the foul smell of uncleaned incontinence. The bed by the window, however, became a patch of purity. It was quiet, and because its occupant valued cleanliness and often opened the window, the odor was less potent. But the moment he saw the person, he still froze. Her expression was dull, her hair matted. She clutched a pillow in her hands. Although cleaner than most in the room, she definitely couldn't be described as being in a good state. She stared blankly out the window, occasionally lowering her head to nuzzle the pillow. At those times, a singular emotion would appear in her eyes: gentle, loving, radiating maternal warmth. Only at this moment Did Julian Thorne finally understand what Willow Astor had said he was the one who most deserved retribution? His departing figure had a hint of someone fleeing in disarray. Hurrying away, he accidentally knocked over a chamber pot placed at the foot of a patient's bed. Fortunately, it was empty, saving him from further embarrassment. But whether it was his imagination or not, he felt a faint, unpleasant odor clinging to his shoes. He was so focused on his hurried escape that he naturally didn't see that, amidst the chaos he caused, Sylvia Meadows, from the innermost part of the room, had quietly turned her head and glanced at him. But soon she averted her gaze again, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 22, Melbourne. Through Theodore's introduction, Willow Astor bought the apartment next to his. The apartment wasn't large, but it was sufficient for her to live alone. However, having just moved in, many things still needed to be purchased. Coincidentally, there was a large hypermarket nearby, so Willow Astor went shopping accompanied by Theodore. The supermarket had a complete range of goods, covering all aspects of daily life, which saved her the trouble of running around. With so many purchases, Willow Astor started to worry about how to get them all back. Don't worry, this hypermarket offers a 1-hour home delivery service. You just need to pay a small delivery fee. Seeing her troubled expression, Theodore couldn't help but chuckle, explaining to her. When she looked at him with a resentful gaze, he stared at her puffed-up cheeks, momentarily lost in thought. At that moment, only one thought remained in his mind. So cute Willow Astor's cheeks reddened under his direct gaze. After a couple of light coughs, she hurriedly turned to find a staff member to discuss the home delivery service. The items requiring delivery were mainly some furniture and appliances. After settling the details, Willow Astor turned and, after a brief word with Theodore, pushed her cart towards the food section. Having just moved in, the refrigerator was empty, a state she wasn't quite used to. Additionally, Theodore's family had helped her greatly with buying the apartment and settling in, and she wanted to repay their kindness. Strolling along, Willow Astor wanted to put everything she saw into the shopping cart: vegetables, meat, snacks, fruits, drinks. By the end of their shopping trip, the cart Theodore was pushing was surprisingly full to the brim. There were many items, and they were quite heavy. Even with the cart helping to save a lot of effort, turning corners was still a bit difficult. Willow Astor turned around and saw his strained expression, only then realizing that Theodore had taken over her cart at some point. A look of annoyance crossed her face. "I'm so sorry, I've troubled you again. Willow, this must be the 100th time you've apologized recently. Aren't we friends? Isn't helping each other out what friends do? If you keep apologizing, does it mean you don't consider me a friend?" Theodore feigned a wronged expression, his words full of accusation, making Willow Astor feel even more guilty. The apology was on the tip of her tongue, but remembering his earlier words, she quickly changed her tune. No, of course I consider you a friend. I just feel like I'm troubling you too much. After all, Theo, you've really helped me a lot and saved me a lot of trouble." Her expression was extremely sincere, which made Theodore unable to hold back a smile. "All right, I know you're not like that, Willow. I just feel that since you consider me a friend, we should be more natural with each other. Don't be afraid to ask for help. In fact, I'd be happy for you to use me." After speaking, he looked at Willow Astor. She happened to look up at the same time, and their eyes met. For a moment, she froze. She had never expected Theodore to say such things. Sincere and ardent emotions were palpable, swirling around them, creating an ambiguous and intimate atmosphere. She swallowed, suddenly feeling her heart skip a beat. Perhaps it was her imagination, but Willow Astor always felt that when she was alone with Theodore, the number of times she blushed increased manifold. Chapter 23. After finishing their shopping, Willow Astor and Theodore returned home with their arms full of purchases. The large bag of food was ultimately carried back by Theodore. All in all, she had spent a lot on this trip, yet she was the one who had exerted the least effort. They arrived home just in time. Willow Astor had just finished putting the groceries into the refrigerator when the doorbell rang. She was about to turn and open it when Theodore, with a long stride, reached the door first. Opening the door, it was indeed the scheduled home delivery. After all the items were brought in, Willow Astor looked at the jam-packed living room and couldn't help exclaiming, "This trip's haul is truly substantial." In the past, she rarely made such large purchases, but she had to admit, This living room full of spoils looked very gratifying. It was only when it came to organizing that the headache began. So much furniture, just unpacking it would be exhausting. After unpacking, it needed to be assembled, and there was a large amount of trash to dispose of. Thinking of this, Willow Astor couldn't help but sigh. What's wrong? Why the sudden sigh? Theodore didn't understand her sorrow. His light golden eyes blinked in confusion, with a hint of subtle concern, afraid that Willow Astor had encountered some difficulty. His words, however, served as a reminder to Willow Astor. She blinked her large, watery eyes, her gaze full of hope. Just that one look almost stole Theodore's heart. How could someone be so cute? From her figure to her appearance to her actions, she was like an adorable, exquisite doll. Is there something I can help with? He was dazed by her look, yet didn't forget to ask if Willow Astor needed help. And after what had happened at the supermarket earlier, she was gradually starting to accept a closer mode of interaction with him. Theo, could I ask you for a favor? She asked cautiously. Seeing him agree without even asking what it was, she didn't know whether to feel sweet or guilty. Perhaps afraid he would regret it, she quickly pointed to the pile of stacked cardboard boxes behind her and grinned. Help me unpack all these boxes, Theodore readily agreed. He pulled over a small chair, sat down, and immediately started unpacking. At first, he didn't think much of it, happily helping while watching Willow Astor bustle about, expertly placing each piece of furniture in its most suitable spot. Until his hands grew sore, but the pile of cardboard boxes behind him seemed endless. The smile on Theodore's face began to stiffen. Noticing his discomfort, Willow Astor smiled apologetically. Are you okay? Let me help you unpack. Seeing her about to put down the furniture she was holding and come over to help, Theodore, as if his pride was wounded, quickly waved his hands, refusing her offer. No need, I can handle it. Willow, you have a real talent for arranging furniture. It looks great. You just focus on putting everything in its perfect place. Saying this, he patted his chest, and to prove he was capable, pointed a commanding finger and took on another task for himself. I'll take care of all this stuff later too. Seeing him so confident, Willow Astor didn't insist, genuinely turning back to arrange the furniture and decorations, leaving Theodore alone to face the remaining half of the packages and the ever-growing pile of cardboard boxes, on the verge of tears. Whether it was an illusion or not, it seemed as if the cardboard boxes had grown faces and were giving him evil smiles. Theodore's face stiffened, his heart filled with vexation. Was it too late to back out now? The answer, of course, was, it was. Willow Astor wasn't that slow, she had indeed noticed his exhaustion. Besides, Theodore was her friend, a guest. Even if she needed his help, Willow Astor couldn't bring herself to dump everything on him alone. Chapter 24, she quickly arranged the remaining appliances, then, smiling, dragged one of the newly unpacked chairs over and sat down beside Theodore. With Willow Astor's help, the pace of unpacking finally quickened. Soon, the last item was unpacked. She stretched lazily, her eyes curving into a smile as she looked at him. Theo, thank you. I definitely wouldn't have managed so smoothly today without you. Her thanks were exceptionally formal, yet not at all distant. Theodore struggled to maintain his composure, but the tips of his ears had already quietly turned red. The redness of his ear tips was particularly conspicuous against his fair skin. Willow Astor noticed it immediately and, somewhat puzzled, instinctively asked, Are you hot? Shall I open a window for some air? She initially thought Theodore was tired from the earlier exertion, but when she saw his ear tips turn even redder upon hearing her words, she suddenly realized. Willow Astor's heart leaped, pounding like thunder. As he took a step towards her, she snapped back to her senses, scrambled towards the kitchen, and said with a sheepish smile, Are you hungry? I bought a lot of groceries at the supermarket today. I remember you saying you liked Chinese food. Let me show you what I can do. Sensing she was avoiding the topic, Theodore felt a little disappointed but didn't press the issue, simply going along with Willow Astor's words. After all that work, I am pretty hungry. Can I be your sous chef? Willow Astor didn't refuse his approach, but sharing the same room made her somewhat flustered. She had been cooking for herself since she was young and should have been extremely proficient by now. Yet, for some reason, today she was exceptionally clumsy with the ingredients, nearly injuring herself several times. In the end, Theodore reached out and took the ingredients from her hands, smiling helplessly. "Let me." After they had eaten their fill, she pushed Theodore out of the kitchen. Seeing her firm demeanor, he raised his hands in surrender and took a step back out of the kitchen. Finally, Willow Astor was alone in the kitchen. Her dishwashing movements became natural again. The only slight imperfection was Theodore constantly standing at the kitchen doorway, as if he wouldn't leave until she had finished cleaning up. When everything was done and Theodore was about to go home, Willow Astor took out the gift she had bought earlier and placed it in his hands. Before he could refuse, she spoke first. "This is for your parents. They've helped me a lot recently. According to the customs where I'm from, you can't refuse this gift." He shrugged and indeed didn't refuse again. But as he was walking out of the apartment, he suddenly turned back to look at Willow Astor. "Willow, I know you're not looking for anything right now, but you don't have to be so unnatural around me. Willow, my feelings for you are my own. Until you're ready, we can just be friends." Theodore's expression was serious, with no hint of joking in his tone. But he paused, and when he spoke again, there was a hint of apprehension in his eyes. "But if the day comes when you're ready to start over, could you let me know first? Maybe. Consider me." Willow Astor knew that, compared to people from her own country, Westerners were more direct in expressing their affection. Yet, Theodore's words still made her taken aback for a moment. Theodore's lifelong belief was that if you like someone, you should say it. It was only because the first person he had ever loved was Willow Astor, and he knew that people from her country were generally more reserved, that he had suppressed his feelings somewhat. But it wasn't until he saw her evasiveness today that he suddenly realized that if things continued this way, he might have to wait a very, very long time. However, Theodore himself wasn't confident about such an unprepared confession. Fortunately, just as he was feeling uneasy, Willow Astor suddenly broke into a smile. "Okay." Their eyes met, their heartbeats echoing each other. Not far from them, the screen of the phone placed on the sofa suddenly lit up. With a ding, the new month's support payment had arrived, followed by a text message. The sender was an unknown number, but from the visible part of the preview, it was easy to tell who the sender was. "Willow, I'm sorry. I don't dare ask for your forgiveness, but I wish you happiness.